During dinner, my daughter-in-law threw a glass at me. How one dinner turned into a courtroom battle. That night began like any other family dinner until my daughter-in-law hurled a crystal glass straight at my face because I refused to pour her another drink. What she didn't know was that I'm a retired judge, and by the next morning, the courtroom became our new dining table. This is a story about control, courage, and justice born out of chaos. Stay tuned to discover how one dinner changed everything. And if you're moved by this story, please subscribe to USLA 1 Stories, share it with friends and relatives, and don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, I invite you and everyone to watch the video and listen to the story. My son, Ethan, cried out in horror as my daughter-in-law, Serena, stood frozen, her arms still extended, a crystal wine glass having just shattered against my face. "You worthless old hag. When I ask you for more wine, you obey," she shrieked, her words slurred, her balance precarious in my meticulously ordered dining room. In that exact moment, a line was not just crossed, it was obliterated. Something deep within me, forged over 3 decades on the bench, finally snapped. As a retired criminal judge, Evelyn Hayes, I knew the law intimately. More importantly, I knew how to wield it with precision. This was not about vengeance, but about re-establishing order and showing Serena who truly governed this household. But let's rewind slightly to the prelude of this shocking event. Dinner had begun with a deceptive calm, a Friday night ritual I'd maintained since Ethan and Serena moved into my home 6 months prior. Their narrative was always the same. They were saving for their own place, just needed a little more time. 6 months later, they were still fixtures, their presence increasingly unsettling. The subtle dynamics of cohabitation, often amplified by financial dependency, had slowly eroded any semblance of peace. It's a common societal pressure, forcing young couples to rely on family support, but it often comes with unforeseen strains, especially when boundaries are not respected. I had spent hours preparing a prime rib roast, the aroma filling the house. My grandmother's crystal glasses, shimmering under the chandelier, adorned a table set with my finest china. For me, these small formalities were anchors, a testament to the routine and order that had defined my life after 30 years in the often chaotic criminal justice system. Serena, however, arrived already agitated. She burst through the front door at 7:30 p.m., flung her purse onto the sofa, and headed straight to the bar. She poured a generous measure of red wine, her complaints about work a bitter monologue. "That imbecile of a boss thinks he can just keep pressing me," she fumed, claiming he'd made her redo an entire report due to missing critical details. She emptied the first glass in 3 large gulps, refilling it before even settling at the table. Ethan shot me an apologetic glance, a familiar expression of a man perpetually trying to appease, to avoid conflict at all costs. Throughout dinner, I attempted to steer the conversation towards civility, asking about Ethan's job at the veterinary clinic, discussing the new book I was reading, anything to dilute the palpable tension Serena carried. But each attempt was met with cynical interruptions or eye rolls, more fitting for a petulant teenager than a 32-year-old woman, and with every interruption she drank more wine. By the 3rd bottle, my patience, a quality finely honed by years of courtroom theatrics, reached its limit. When Serena extended her empty glass in my direction, as if I were a mere servant, I calmly stated, "I think you've had enough for today, Serena." She froze, glass suspended, eyes wide with incredulity. She managed. I said, "You've had enough. This is my house, and I will not allow you to get drunk like this at my table." It was akin to lighting a fuse. Her face flushed, not solely from the wine, but from a sudden, raw fury that had been simmering for months. "Your house," she scoffed, a bitter, grating sound that sliced through the air. "Just because we have to live in this old museum with you doesn't mean you can treat us like children." Ethan touched her arm. "Serena, please." But she violently pulled away. "No, Ethan, I'm tired of this. Your mother looks at us as if we're intruders, as if we're not worthy to walk on her precious hardwood floors." She spun to face me. "Do you know what your problem is? You can't accept that you're no longer the powerful Judge Evelyn Hayes. Now you're just a lonely, retired old woman who needs to control everything and everyone around her to feel important." I remained perfectly still. Years in the courtroom had instilled in me the discipline not to react when provoked, a vital lesson in strategic engagement. "If that's how you feel," I stated, my voice steady, "perhaps it's time for you to find somewhere else to live." "Mom," Ethan exclaimed, horrified. Serena, however, smiled a chilling, hollow smile that never reached her eyes. "Servants shouldn't talk like that to their superiors." She extended the glass again, demanding, "Now, more wine." "No," I replied. In a swift, unpredicted motion, Serena hurled the glass directly at my face. It struck my right temple, shattering instantly. A sharp pain, then the warm, sticky sensation of blood trickling down my face. Ethan screamed. Serena stood, breathing heavily, seemingly startled by her own act, yet utterly devoid of remorse. I pressed my hand to my temple, watching my fingers turn crimson. The silence that followed was deafening. 30 years of sending criminals to prison, and now I was bleeding at my own dining table. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm despite the internal turmoil, "take your wife to her room now." He rushed to pull Serena, who still seemed dazed. I heard their footsteps on the stairs, then the definitive slam of a door. I went to the bathroom. The cut wasn't deep, but head wounds bleed profusely. As I cleaned it, my thoughts coalesced, like a prosecutor meticulously building a case. I took out my phone and documented everything: photographs of the cut, the blood stain on my white blouse, the glass shards on the dining room floor. Each fragment was carefully collected and placed into a plastic bag. Evidence. The justice system had taught me that evidence is paramount. Sleep eluded me that night. In my office, an ice pack pressed to my temple, I began outlining my plan. Not for revenge. Revenge is impulsive, emotional. What I sought was justice, and with it, the protection of my son and my home. At 6 minutes past midnight, with a purplish bruise already forming, I picked up the phone. "Miami Police Department. How can I help you?" "I want to report a case of assault." The officer arrived at 7:30 a.m. As the morning sun filtered through the curtains, Serena and Ethan were still asleep, drained from the previous night's drama. I opened the door to Officer Davis, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair. "Good morning, ma'am. I received a call about an assault." I led him to the dining room where, in my sleepless hours, I had marked the preserved glass fragments with small, numbered labels. "It happened here," I explained, keeping my voice low. "My daughter-in-law threw this glass at my face when I refused to serve her more wine. She had already had too much to drink." I showed him the photographs on my cell phone, the cut, the blood on my blouse. Officer Davis, his expression professional and non-judgmental, recorded every detail. "Is the aggressor still in the residence?" "Yes, sleeping upstairs with my son." "Do you wish to file a formal complaint?" I hesitated, thinking of Ethan, But then Serena's look of entitlement as she threw the glass flashed in my mind. That chilling certainty she could assault me in my own home and escape consequences. "Yes, officer," I affirmed. "I want to file a formal complaint." We sat at the kitchen table as he completed the police report, full name of the aggressor, our relationship, a detailed description of the incident. I provided the information with the same clear, precise, and unemotional tone I used to dictate sentences from the bench. We were nearing completion when footsteps echoed on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes swollen with sleep, confusion morphing into horror at the sight of the police officer. "Mom, what's going on?" Before I could answer, Serena emerged behind him, initially confused, but her face quickly hardened to anger upon seeing my injured temple and the officer. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. Officer Davis stood. "Mrs. Serena Vance, I'm here to investigate an assault complaint that occurred at this residence last night." Ethan looked at me, incredulous. "You called the police on Serena?" "She assaulted me, Ethan. She threw a glass at my face and cut me," I reiterated, my voice unwavering, devoid of remorse. "It was an accident. She was drunk." Ethan protested desperately. "Being intoxicated is not a valid defense for physical assault, sir," the officer interjected, his tone firm. Serena stepped forward, fists clenched. "You can't be serious. This is ridiculous." It was a family argument. A family argument that resulted in physical injury, I countered calmly, and in my own home. The officer addressed Serena. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to accompany me to the police station to make a statement." "What?" she yelled. "You're going to arrest me over a broken glass." At this moment, I am only requesting that you provide a statement. Depending on the facts confirmed, you could be charged with battery. Ethan was now crying, pleading, glances darting between me and the officer. "Please, Mom, don't do this. We can resolve this in the family." I looked at my son, feeling a pang of sorrow unrelated to my injury. "Ethan, we have been trying to resolve this in the family for 6 months. Last night, Serena crossed a line." The officer asked Serena to get dressed properly. She stomped up the stairs, Ethan trailing behind, imploring her to calm down. I remained alone with the officer for a few minutes. He gave me a look. I recognized the look of veteran law enforcement trying to decipher the complex family dynamics behind a domestic incident. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to go through with this? Family issues can sometimes be..." "Officer," I interrupted politely, "I worked 30 years as a criminal judge. I know exactly what I am doing and what the legal consequences will be." He seemed surprised, then nodded with a newfound respect. Serena descended, now dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair hastily tied back. Ethan followed, still silently weeping. "This isn't going to end here," Serena sneered as she passed me. "You're going to regret doing this." The officer warned her against making threats, which only intensified her fury. As he escorted her outside, Ethan turned to me, his eyes red. "How could you do this? She's my wife. And I'm your mother," I replied simply. "And this is my house." The front door closed, and silence once again enveloped the house. Ethan stared at me for a few seconds, as if he didn't recognize me, before running upstairs. I heard the bedroom door slam. I sank into the living room armchair, suddenly exhausted. The bruise throbbed, but the physical pain was almost a relief compared to the ache of seeing Ethan's devastated face. Yet, I had no regrets. Years in the courtroom had taught me that justice doesn't always feel fair at the moment of its application. but it is necessary for long-term order. 2 hours later, Ethan came downstairs with a backpack. His face was determined, though his eyes remained swollen. "I'm going to pick up Serena at the police station. We'll stay at Jessica's place until we decide what to do." Jessica was a friend of theirs who lived in a small apartment downtown. It wasn't a permanent solution, and we both knew it. "Ethan," I began, trying to soften my voice. "You don't have to leave. This is your home, too." He laughed, a humorless sound. "This house stopped being mine the moment you decided to call the police on my wife. She assaulted me, Ethan, at my own dining room table. She was drunk and lost her temper," he argued. "People make mistakes, and people need to answer for their mistakes," I responded, my voice now firmer, "especially when those mistakes involve physical violence." Ethan shook his head. "It's always been like this," the inflexible judge. "The law above everything, even your own son." That accusation stung more than the cut on my temple, but I didn't let it show. "It's because I love you that I'm doing this, Ethan. Serena is abusive, and you're trapped in that relationship. Don't you dare analyze my marriage. You've always hated Serena. You've always believed I deserved better. And you do deserve it," I said calmly. "You deserve someone who respects you and who respects your family." Ethan grabbed his car keys from the coffee table. "I'm going to get my wife. Then we'll come back to pick up the rest of the things." As the door closed behind him, I let out a long, weary sigh. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the peaceful silence I cherished. It was a heavy silence, pregnant with consequences. I spent the rest of the day in a state of numbness, oscillating between doubt and certainty. Had I done the right thing? Had I lost my son forever? These questions spun endlessly in my mind as I tried to read, tried to eat, tried to distract myself. That night, the phone rang. It was Ethan. "We're at Jessica's place. Serena was released with a summons to appear at a hearing next week." His voice was cold, distant. "We'll stop by tomorrow to pick up our things." "Ethan, you don't have to." "I've already made my decision, Mom. I choose to stand by my wife." After he hung up, I sat at my office desk and opened a new folder on my computer. I named it Case Serena. Inside, I created documents to record every stage of the process, every decision made, every piece of evidence collected. For 3 decades, I had built cases against criminals of all kinds. Now, I was building a case to save my son from a toxic marriage, even if, for the moment, he hated me for it. The next morning, as I awaited Ethan and Serena's arrival, I called an old friend. Detective Randall. Rick Thorne and I had worked together for years. He as a detective, I as a judge. He retired before I did and now ran a small private investigation agency. "Ellie, how long has it been?" His deep voice brought instant comfort. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need your help, Rick. It's a delicate matter." I explained the situation, the assault, the police report, the rift with Ethan. "I need to know more about Serena. I have a bad feeling about her finances, about how they're really living." Rick didn't ask unnecessary questions. "Send me her details. I'll look into it discreetly." An hour later, I parked my car 2 blocks from the house and waited. I didn't want to be present when they retrieved their belongings. Direct confrontation would only exacerbate things. From my vantage point, I watched Ethan's car arrive. He and Serena entered using the key Ethan still possessed. I observed the house for almost 2 hours, occasionally seeing one of them at a window, carrying boxes, moving swiftly. When they finally left, the car was visibly loaded. Ethan looked at the house one last time before getting into the vehicle. Even from a distance, I could see he was crying. Serena, conversely, seemed irritated, gesticulating as she spoke, though I couldn't hear her words. I waited another 20 minutes before returning home. Their absence was almost palpable, empty spaces where objects had been, silences where conversations had once echoed. The guest room they had occupied was partially empty. They left the furniture, of course, but all personal items were gone. In the closet, I noticed one of my pieces of jewelry was missing, a gold brooch that belonged to my mother. Ethan knew how much I valued it. Was it an oversight, or a small act of revenge? I preferred to believe the former. The following days were filled with an oppressive silence. Ethan didn't call, didn't answer my texts. I tried to respect his space, but each day without news was a small torture. On Wednesday, I received Rick's first report. Sitting in my office, I opened the email attachment with apprehension. The discoveries were far worse than I had imagined. Serena had been fired from her job 3 months earlier. She wasn't simply having problems with the boss, as she claimed at dinners. She was unemployed, hiding it from everyone, even Ethan. But this was only the tip of the iceberg. Serena had 5 credit cards, all maxed out, totaling a debt of almost $800,000. Worse still, 2 of those cards were in Ethan's name, likely opened with a power of attorney or using his data without his knowledge. The report also revealed something truly alarming: 3 significant withdrawals from Ethan's retirement account in the last 2 months, amounting to $400,000. To make those withdrawals, Serena would need access to Ethan's passwords, or have forged his signature. There was more: small complaints at stores for bounce checks, an eviction notice from a previous apartment they never mentioned, and most worrying, conversations captured on social media where Serena talked with friends about inheriting a house soon when the old lady bites the dust. The old lady was me. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a case of explosive temper or a disrespectful daughter-in-law. It was a systematic, predatory scheme. Serena was financially drowning my son while planning a future built on my death. I printed the entire report and placed it in a secure folder. I needed more. I needed to understand the full extent of the situation before confronting Ethan with these discoveries. I called Rick again. I need you to keep investigating, especially the withdrawals from the retirement account. If you get concrete evidence that Serena acted without Ethan's authorization, we could be talking about financial crimes. I'm on it, Rick replied. And Ellie, be careful. If this woman is financially desperate and believes she can inherit something from you, well. He didn't need to finish the sentence. 30 years in the criminal system had taught me that money is one of the most powerful motivators for desperate acts. That night, I changed the locks on the house, a necessary precaution. The following week brought the preliminary hearing on the assault. I attended the courthouse where I had presided for decades, this time as a victim. It felt strange to sit on the other side, to see former colleagues greet me with expressions of concern, to hear whispers in the corridors. Serena arrived with her lawyer, a young man in a poorly fitting suit who looked fresh out of law school. Ethan wasn't with her, which surprised me. I expected my son to be there to support his wife. The judge was Eleanor Vance, a competent woman I knew superficially from my last years on the bench. She recognized me immediately, nodding discreetly in my direction. The procedure was brief and direct. The prosecutor presented the accusations of misdemeanor battery. Serena's lawyer argued it was an isolated incident caused by stress and alcohol consumption, with no intent to cause harm. Your Honor, he said, my client has no criminal record and is deeply remorseful for what happened. We request an alternative measure to jail be considered, such as community service. When it was my turn to speak, I rose with the familiar posture I had maintained for decades in those very rooms. Your Honor, I do not seek revenge or severe punishment. I seek justice and, primarily, protection. The assault occurred in my own home, at my own table, by someone I sheltered out of kindness. I respectfully request that in addition to any punitive measure the court deems appropriate, a restraining order be issued, preventing the defendant from approaching my residence. I saw Serena's face turn pale. A restraining order would mean she couldn't return to my house, the house where she and Ethan were living, the house she apparently hoped to inherit. The judge deliberated for a few moments before announcing her decision. In view of the nature of the incident and the relationship between the parties, I determined that the defendant shall complete 6 months of community service and mandatory participation in an anger management program. Additionally, I issue a temporary restraining order prohibiting the defendant from approaching within 100 yards of the victim's residence and person for a period of 90 days, after which the situation will be re-evaluated. Serena's lawyer tried to protest, arguing the restraining order was excessive given the family context, but the judge was firm. Domestic violence is no less serious for occurring among family members, sir. On the contrary, as I left the courtroom, I noticed Ethan sitting on the back bench. Our eyes met briefly before he averted his gaze, quickly getting up to meet Serena in the hallway. I wanted to approach him, explain why I was doing all this, tell him about the worrying discoveries, but the moment wasn't right. Ethan wasn't ready to listen. I returned home and added the hearing transcript and a copy of the restraining order to my Case Serena folder. The folder was growing thicker, both literally and metaphorically. 2 days later, I received an unexpected call. It was Ethan, Mom. His voice sounded exhausted, almost unrecognizable. We need to talk. We agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop, far from both my house and Jessica's apartment. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table in a corner for privacy. Ethan walked in punctually. He was thinner, with deep dark circles he couldn't completely hide. He was wearing a turtleneck sweater despite the warmth of the day, something that immediately activated my internal alarms. "Are you okay?" I asked as soon as he sat down. "I'm dealing with the situation," he replied, avoiding my gaze as he picked up the menu. We ordered coffee, black for me with milk for him, as always. When the waitress left, we sat in an awkward silence, neither of us knowing how to begin. "The restraining order complicated things," he finally said. "We've been at Jessica's place for almost 2 weeks. The sofa is killing my back, and her patience is running out. Can you rent a place?" I suggested, keeping my voice neutral, non-accusatory. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "With what money? My salary barely covers our basic bills, and Serena." He hesitated, looking at his hands. "Serena hasn't found a new job yet." He still believed that lie. I took a sip of coffee, pondering how to proceed. Confronting him directly with everything I'd discovered could make him completely shut down. "Ethan, if you're having financial difficulties, I can help you. Just you." He finally looked at me directly. "What does that mean, just me?" "It means I worry about you and I want to ensure you're okay. But I have conditions for that help." "What conditions?" His voice tightened. "I want you to review your bank accounts. All of them. Your savings, your retirement, your credit card statements." Ethan frowned. "Why is that?" Because I have reason to believe that you're unaware of your true financial situation. What are you talking about? Ah. Ethan put the cup down with excessive force, spilling some coffee. If this is some attempt to turn me against Serena, it's not an attempt. I interrupted gently. It's a request based on facts I've discovered. Ethan, when was the last time you checked your retirement fund? His expression changed subtly. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. I don't know. A few months ago, maybe. I set everything up for automatic deposits. And the withdrawals? Did you authorize any withdrawals recently? He went completely still. What withdrawals? I opened my purse and took out a sheet of paper, a statement from his retirement fund that Rick had obtained. I placed it on the table, turned toward him. The document clearly showed 3 large withdrawals in the last 2 months. Ethan took the paper with trembling hands, his face losing color as he read. This isn't possible. I never authorized this. There's more, I said gently, taking other documents from my purse, credit card statements in his name with purchases he clearly hadn't made, including expensive jewelry and transfers to accounts we didn't recognize. Ethan glanced through the papers, his breathing quickening. How did you get all this? I hired a private investigator. After Serena assaulted me, I realized something was very wrong. You investigated my wife? His voice rose an octave, indignant. I investigated to protect you, I replied firmly. And it seems I was right to worry. Ethan, Serena was fired 3 months ago. You have 5 credit cards maxed out, 2 of them in your name. She withdrew $400,000 from your retirement without your authorization. This is a crime. Ethan closed his eyes, taking several deep breaths. When he opened them, there was a mix of emotions in his gaze: anger, confusion, fear, and finally a flash of recognition. The bills. She always said she was paying the bills, but there was always money missing. I thought it was because my salary is low that we weren't managing well. She's stealing from you, son. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, there must be an explanation. Maybe she was desperate after losing her job. Maybe she didn't want to worry me. She must have planned to pay the money back when she got a new job. Ethan, I said with all the gentleness I could muster, there's something else you need to see. I handed him the last document. Screenshots of Serena's conversations with friends, where she talked about inheriting a house soon when the old lady bites the dust, and putting up with the old lady for a few more months until we resolve our compass financial situation. Ethan read the messages once, twice, 3 times, as if he couldn't comprehend the words in front of him. Then I saw something in his face break. A tear rolled down his cheek, followed by another and another. She always said you didn't accept us because you were too traditional. That's why you treated us with such coldness. Ethan, I never cared who you chose to love. I care about how that person treats you. He wiped the tears with a napkin. When we moved into your house, she said it would be temporary, just until we saved money for our own place. But something always came up. An unexpected bill. An emergency. She said we were saving, but I never saw the money grow. I held his hand across the table. And the sweater? It's too hot to wear a turtleneck. Ethan paled and instinctively pulled the collar up higher. It's nothing. Is it her? Has she also been violent with you? His eyes filled with tears again. Slowly, he pulled the collar down, revealing yellowish bruises, finger marks on his neck that seemed to be fading. It was after the hearing, he whispered. She was furious about the restraining order. She said I should have testified in her favor, that I chose you over her. Ethan looked down. I'm so scared, Mom. The anger I felt at that moment was different from the cold indignation I experienced when Serena threw the glass at me. It was a protective, primal fury, but I couldn't let it control me. Ethan needed clarity, not more emotional chaos. I want you to come home with me today, I said firmly. Right now. Serena can't approach the house because of the restraining order. You'll be safe there. As for your things, we'll send someone to get them later. The important thing is to get you out of that situation immediately. She's going to go crazy when she finds out I left. That's exactly why you need to leave, Ethan. This is a classic pattern of abuse. Ethan remained silent for a long moment, looking at the documents scattered in front of us. Irrefutable proof of Serena's financial and emotional betrayal. Finally, he nodded slightly. Okay, let's go home. On the way back, Ethan remained silent, looking out the window. Only when I parked in the garage did he speak again. How did I let this happen? How did I not realize? Abuse rarely starts out obvious, I replied, turning off the engine. It begins with small lies, small controls that gradually escalate. By the time you realize it, you're already caught in a web. We walked into the house that was always his, too. The house where he grew up. Ethan stopped in the middle of the living room, looking around as if seeing the place for the first time. I'm going to prepare your room, I said, going up the stairs. Ethan's room was still as it always was. I had preserved it when he left for college and kept it when he and Serena moved into the guest room. It was a refuge from the past, a place where he could feel safe again. I changed the sheets, opened the windows to let in fresh air, and put fresh flowers on the nightstand. Small gestures to tell him he was welcome, that this was his home. When I came down, I found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his cell phone. He looked up when I entered. She's called 12 times, sent 20 texts asking where I am. You don't need to answer now. I need to. If I don't answer, she'll show up here. Restraining order or not. Ethan typed a brief message. I need some time to think. I'm safe. Please don't look for me today. Seconds later, the phone began to ring. Serena's name flashed on the screen. Ethan rejected the call with trembling hands and turned off the device. What do I do now? He asked, looking lost. One step at a time, I replied, sitting next to him. First, we need to protect your finances. Tomorrow we change your bank passwords and notify the bank about the unauthorized transactions. Then we see a lawyer to discuss your legal options. Legal options. He repeated as if tasting the words. You mean divorce? Among other things. What she did, the unauthorized withdrawals. The credit cards in your name are financial crimes. Ethan, you can choose whether or not to file a complaint, but we need to stop her from continuing. Ethan nodded slowly. I never thought I'd be in this situation. I always thought I'd recognize abuse if it happened to me. No one thinks it will happen to them. That's why abuse persists. It's disguised. It's justified. It makes the victim doubt themselves. That night, I prepared dinner while Ethan took a long bath. We had a simple meal, silent most of the time, but it was a different silence from the one that had been between us in the previous weeks. It wasn't a silence of anger or resentment, but of reflection, of reconnection. Before going to sleep, Ethan hugged me, the first hug in weeks. Thank you for not giving up on me, he whispered. I would never give up, I replied, holding him a little tighter. That night, lying in my bed, I heard Ethan crying in the next room. The sound broke my heart, but it also brought me a strange relief. He was home. He was safe, and the crying was part of the cure. The next day, as we planned, we went to the bank. Ethan canceled all the cards, changed passwords, blocked access. We initiated the process of disputing the unauthorized withdrawals from his retirement. The manager, seeing the documents and hearing the explanation, strongly suggested that Ethan file a formal complaint for fraud. We'll think about it. That was all he could manage to respond at the moment. In the afternoon, we met with attorney Lena Sharma, specializing in family law and domestic abuse cases. Rebecca was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a firm presence. Exactly the kind of person we needed. Based on what you told me and the documents you brought, we have a solid case for divorce on the grounds of improper marital conduct, Lena explained. The financial abuse is well documented, and with the evidence of physical abuse, we can request a permanent protective order, not just the temporary one that already exists. Ethan took a deep breath. What if I don't want her to go to jail? I understand your hesitation, Lena replied gently. Many victims of domestic abuse have conflicting feelings about criminally prosecuting their abusers. We can initially focus on the divorce and protecting your assets. Criminal complaints can be a separate decision you make when you're ready. Leaving the office, Ethan seemed simultaneously exhausted and relieved. It feels like I'm waking up from a nightmare, he commented as we drove home. It's a process, I replied. It's not going to be solved overnight. I know, but now at least I'm walking in the right direction. That night was interrupted by a noise at the front door around 10. Furious banging, the doorbell ringing repeatedly. Ethan and I looked at each other on the sofa where we were watching a movie. It's her, Ethan whispered, fear evident in his voice. She can't get in, I assured him, grabbing the phone. And she's violating the restraining order. I'm calling the police. The banging continued, getting louder as I reported the situation to the 911 operator. My daughter-in-law is violating a restraining order, trying to force her way into my house. We need a patrol car immediately. Ethan. Serena's voice penetrated the door. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. Ethan shrank on the sofa, trembling. I went to him and held his hands. It's okay. She can't get in. The police are on their way. Serena continued yelling, threatening, imploring alternately. The noise attracted the neighbors' attention. I saw lights turning on in nearby houses, faces appearing in the windows. When the patrol car arrived 7 minutes later, Serena was still on the porch, now kicking the door. The police found her in flagrant violation of the restraining order. We watched through the window as they arrested her. She continued looking at the house, screaming Ethan's name, even as they put her in the patrol car. What's going to happen to her now? Ethan asked, his voice almost inaudible. She'll be arrested for violation of the restraining order. I replied. This has serious consequences. That night, Ethan slept in my room, as he did when he was little and had nightmares. But this time the nightmare was outside, being taken away. The next morning, I received a call from the detective in charge of the restraining order violation case. Serena would be kept in custody until the bail hearing scheduled for the following day. Due to the recent history of violence and the clear demonstration of instability, it is likely that the judge will set strict conditions for provisional release, he explained. This may include an electronic ankle monitor and constant supervision. I thanked him for the information and hung up, feeling a mix of relief and concern. Ethan was still sleeping. The events of the night before had completely exhausted him. I prepared breakfast and left a note explaining where he could find me. I had a scheduled meeting with Rick, my investigator friend, to discuss the new discoveries. We met at his small office downtown. Rick looked worried when he greeted me. "Ellie, we discovered more things about Serena. Things you need to see." He opened a folder and spread documents on the table. There were police records from 2 different cities, both involving Serena in cases of domestic violence and financial fraud. "She's done this before," Rick explained. "In Atlanta 5 years ago and in Dallas 3 years ago. In both cases, she got involved with people who were financially well off, moved into their houses, started manipulating their finances, and eventually became violent." I felt a chill. "And what happened in those cases?" "In the first one, the victim withdrew the complaints after Serena made promises to change. In the second, there was an out-of-court settlement. The victim paid a significant amount of money to get Serena out of his life." "She's a serial predator," I murmured, glancing through the documents. "And Ethan was just her most recent victim." "Exactly. And there's something else." Rick hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "We found evidence that Serena recently researched life insurance and inheritance, specifically how to guarantee inheritance rights through marriage." A shiver ran down my spine. The implications were clear and terrifying. "Do you think she—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I can't say for sure that she was planning something specific," Rick replied. "But the pattern is worrying. She drained Ethan's financial resources. She knew you have a valuable house and other assets." The searches about inheritance, combined with the comments about the old lady biting the dust, paint a disturbing picture. I left Rick's office with the folder of documents heavy in my hands, and an even greater worry heavy in my chest. What started as a case of assault at my dining room table had transformed into something much more sinister. When I got home, Ethan was in the kitchen preparing lunch. There was a new energy in him, still fragile but determined. "Where were you?" he asked, putting water on to boil. "Meeting with an investigator friend," I replied, placing the folder on the table. "Ethan, we need to talk." He looked at the folder, then at me, and turned off the stove. "More bad news. Important information. Please sit down." I showed him the documents, carefully explaining Serena's patterns of behavior in previous relationships. Ethan listened in silence, his face going through a series of emotions: shock, pain, rage, and finally resolve. "So I wasn't special," he finally said. "I was simply convenient." "You were a target," I corrected softly. "But that doesn't diminish who you are. Predators like Serena are skilled at identifying good, trustworthy people and manipulating them." Ethan ran his hand over his face, taking a deep breath. "What do we do now?" "We need to talk to the lawyer and the police. These new documents strengthen both the divorce case and the possible criminal proceedings. And her bail hearing is tomorrow." "Yes. I don't have to attend, right? But I want to. I need to look her in the eyes, knowing the truth." The determination in Ethan's voice surprised me. In just a few days, he had gone from a confused victim to a resolved survivor. That afternoon, Ethan and I worked out a detailed plan. First, he filed a petition for a contested divorce citing financial and physical abuse, accompanied by all the documents we had collected. Then, we filed formal complaints for the financial crimes, unauthorized use of the retirement account, and fraudulent opening of credit cards. The attorney, Lena, accompanied us every step of the way, ensuring all documents were impeccable. "We want to create a case so solid that there's no room for escape," she explained. "The combination of the civil and criminal proceedings will create immense pressure." The next morning, we prepared for the bail hearing. Ethan chose a sober outfit, black dress pants, and a white shirt, the kind of clothing he would wear for an important job interview. I opted for one of the suits I used to wear when I was still a judge, a subtle reminder to the court of who I was. The courthouse was relatively empty when we arrived, accompanied by Lena. We were directed to the courtroom, where we took discreet seats in the back. Ethan held my hand tightly, his fingers cold despite the warmth of the day. When Serena was brought in, wearing the orange jail uniform and handcuffs, Ethan sharply inhaled. It was the first time he had seen her since the night of the trespass. Serena scanned the room, and her eyes fixed on us. For a moment, her expression softened when she saw Ethan. But then she noticed our intertwined hands and her face contorted into rage. She said something to her lawyer, who looked in our direction and shook his head. The judge entered, and the hearing began. The prosecutor presented the case: flagrant violation of a restraining order, recent history of violence, risk of witness intimidation. "Furthermore, Your Honor," he added, "we have information that the defendant has a history of similar behavior in other jurisdictions, having been involved in previous cases of domestic violence and fraud in Atlanta and Dallas." This was new information to Serena. She turned sharply toward her lawyer, visibly shocked. She didn't expect her past to catch up with her so quickly. The public defender tried to argue that Serena had ties to the community, posed no real risk, and could await trial out of custody. The judge listened to the arguments with an impassive expression before announcing her decision. "Considering the seriousness of the violation, the defendant's history, and the evident risk to the victims, I determine that the defendant shall remain in custody until trial with the possibility of review in 30 days upon presentation of an adequate supervision plan." Serena let out a sound of protest, quickly silenced by her lawyer. As the officers approached to take her back to detention, she turned and looked directly at Ethan. "Please." Her voice sounded desperate. "Ethan, don't let this happen. I love you. We can fix this." Ethan didn't look away. He stood firm, looking directly into the eyes of the woman who had betrayed and abused him for months. He said nothing, just watched as Serena was led out of the courtroom. In the hallway, after the hearing ended, Ethan finally released my hand and took a deep breath. "I thought it would be harder," he confessed, "seeing her like that, hearing her beg. But I could only think of everything we discovered. The other people, the lies, the inheritance searches." "You are very strong," I said, feeling immense pride for my son. "I don't feel strong," he replied honestly. "I feel stupid for having fallen for this, for not having seen the signs." "You're not stupid. You were manipulated by someone who turned manipulation into an art form." On the way back home, we stopped at a hardware store and bought paint. Ethan had decided to repaint his room, a symbolic act of a new beginning. He chose a soft blue, almost sky blue, the color of the sky after the storm passes, as he described it. The following days brought an almost therapeutic routine. During the day, we dealt with the legal matters, meetings with Lena, visits to the bank to resolve the financial issues, filling out forms for the criminal complaints. At night, we painted Ethan's room, moved furniture, renewed the space that had been his in childhood and adolescence, and that would now be his refuge for healing. 2 weeks later, we received the news that the bank had accepted the dispute of the retirement withdrawals. The $400,000 would be returned to Ethan's account, and the bank would cooperate with the criminal investigation against Serena. "It's a start," Ethan commented when we received the news. "One step at a time, right?" "Exactly," I agreed. That afternoon, as we applied the last coat of paint to the ceiling of the room, Ethan said something he had been holding back. "Do you know what's the hardest thing to accept? It's not the money. It's not the lies. Not even the violence. It's realizing that the last 2 years of my life were based on a farce. That the person I loved never really existed." I climbed down from the ladder and sat on the edge of the bed, protected by plastic tarps. "Grieving for what you thought you had is often much harder than grieving for what you actually lost." Ethan nodded, climbing down from the ladder and sitting beside me. "How do I move forward after this? How do I trust anyone again?" "Slowly," I replied carefully, "with the support of people who truly love you. And remembering that what happened doesn't define who you are or what you deserve in life." He leaned his head on my shoulder, staining my old t-shirt with blue paint. I didn't mind in the slightest. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he murmured. "Even when I was angry at you, even when I chose the wrong side." "That's what mothers do," I replied simply. "We wait for the moment when our children are ready to listen. Then we're there to help them rebuild." A month passed. Life took on a new normalcy. Ethan had returned to his job at the veterinary clinic, now full-time. I had returned to my retired routines, reading in the morning, gardening in the afternoon, occasional dinners with friends. The criminal case against Serena progressed slowly, as is typical in the justice system. She remained in custody, having been denied a second request for provisional release when new evidence of her previous activities came to light. Ethan had started therapy twice a week, working to understand what had made him vulnerable to abuse and how to build healthier relationships in the future. Some nights I heard him crying in his room, but the episodes were becoming less frequent, less intense. One Saturday afternoon, as we prepared lunch together, an activity that had become a comforting ritual, the phone rang. It was Lena, the attorney. "I have news," she said. "Serena's lawyer contacted me proposing a plea deal." Ethan put the phone on speaker so I could also hear. "What kind of deal?" "She pleads guilty to the financial crimes and the violation of the restraining order in exchange for a reduced sentence. 2 years in prison followed by 3 years of supervised probation. She also agrees to a no-contest divorce, waiving any claim to your assets or your mother's future inheritance." Ethan looked at me, his eyes seeking guidance. "What do you think?" "It's your decision, Ethan, but 2 years in prison plus 3 years of probation is a significant sentence. And most importantly, she would be legally admitting what she did." "If we don't accept," Ethan asked Lena, "what happens?" "We go to trial. With the evidence we have, I believe we can get a harsher conviction, maybe 4 or 5 years in prison, but trials are unpredictable, and you would have to testify, reliving everything publicly." Ethan took a deep breath. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Lena replied. They gave us a 3-day deadline to consider the proposal. After we hung up, Ethan silently returned to chopping vegetables for the salad. I respected his silence, giving him space to process. "I don't know if I want to see her in jail for 5 years," he finally said. "Not out of revenge, but I also don't know if 2 years is enough to feel safe when she gets out." "Supervised probation is not a game," I commented. "She would have to report regularly. She couldn't approach you. She would have to participate in rehabilitation programs. Any violation would send her straight back to prison." Ethan nodded, absorbing the information. And the divorce would be faster if she doesn't contest. Much faster and less emotionally exhausting for you. He continued chopping tomatoes in silence for a few more minutes. I'm going to think it over. I want to make the right decision for the right reasons. 2 days later, Ethan asked me to accompany him to Lena's office. He had made his decision. I want to accept the plea deal, he announced as soon as we sat down. Not because it's easier, but because it's enough. 2 years in prison, 3 on probation, a clean divorce, and the legal recognition of her guilt. It's justice without being revenge. Lena smiled. I think that's a wise decision, Ethan. I'll communicate it to the prosecutor and her lawyer immediately. The process was surprisingly fast after that. A week later, we appeared in court for the hearing where Serena would formally accept the plea deal. It was the first time Ethan would see her since the bail hearing a month ago. Serena seemed to have aged years in just a few weeks. The prison uniform hung loosely on her thinner body. Her once perfectly dyed hair now showed gray roots. When she saw us entering the courtroom, her eyes fixed on Ethan with a disturbing intensity. The judge reviewed the terms of the agreement in detail before addressing the defendant. Mrs. Vance, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you're admitting to committing the crimes of financial fraud, battery, and violation of a court order? Yes, Your Honor, Serena replied, her voice rougher than I remembered. And are you doing so voluntarily, aware of the consequences? Yes. Very well. This court accepts your plea of guilty and sentences you to 2 years of incarceration followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The specific terms of the probation include an absolute prohibition of contact with the victims, mandatory participation in anger management programs, and alcohol dependency treatment, in addition to financial restitution as stipulated in the civil agreement. The judge banged the gavel, finalizing the sentence. As the officers approached to take her away, Serena turned toward us one last time. Ethan, she called out, ignoring the guard's warnings. I'm sorry for everything. Ethan did not respond. He only held her gaze for a few seconds before looking away. It was the closure he needed, not a pardon, not a reconciliation, just the silent acknowledgement that that chapter was ending. In the hallway after the hearing, Ethan finally released my hand and took a deep breath. I thought it would be harder, he confessed. Seeing her like that, hearing her beg, but I could only think of everything we discovered. The other people, the lies, the inheritance searches. You are very strong, I said, feeling immense pride for my son. I don't feel strong, he replied honestly. I feel stupid for having fallen for this, for not having seen the signs. You're not stupid. You were manipulated by someone who turned manipulation into an art form. On the way back home, we stopped at a hardware store and bought paint. Ethan had decided to repaint his room, a symbolic act of a new beginning. He chose a soft blue, almost sky blue, the color of the sky after the storm passes, as he described it. The following days brought an almost therapeutic routine. During the day, we dealt with the legal matters, meetings with Lena, visits to the bank to resolve the financial issues, filling out forms for the criminal complaints. At night, we painted Ethan's room, moved furniture, renewed the space that had been his in childhood and adolescence, and that would now be his refuge for healing. 3 months after our first meeting, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a state conference on domestic violence. He was nervous, questioning whether he was ready to share his story on such a public stage. What if I'm not eloquent enough? He asked as we rehearsed his presentation in the living room. What if I freeze in the middle and look like an amateur? Then you take a deep breath, take a sip of water and continue, I replied. Remember, you're not there to impress anyone with your perfect public speaking. You're there to share a truth that can help other people. On the day of the conference, I sat in the audience, watching my son step onto the stage. He was wearing a simple but elegant blue suit, his hair neatly styled. He looked confident, centered. My name is Evelyn Hayes, he began. And today I'm going to share with you how a broken glass of wine saved my life. For 40 minutes, he kept the audience completely engaged, alternating between moments of raw vulnerability when describing his own abuse and precise analysis of how the system often fails to recognize and address financial abuse, especially concerning male victims, a demographic frequently overlooked in domestic violence discourse. He concluded with a powerful call for more education, better laws, and greater societal awareness. The standing ovation he received when he finished lasted several minutes. As I watched, tears welled in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a deep and overwhelming pride. My son had transformed his pain into purpose, his experience into wisdom. After the talk, as we prepared to leave, Evelyn was approached by an older woman, elegantly dressed, with a badge identifying her as a representative of a philanthropic foundation. Mr. Hayes, your presentation was extraordinary, the woman said. I'm impressed with the work you and your organization are doing. I'd like to discuss the possibility of funding to expand Safe New Beginnings. The name of the project Evelyn had started with Lena's help, aiming to provide resources for victims of financial and emotional abuse. Evelyn looked at me, his eyes wide with surprise and hope. I nodded encouragingly. That would be wonderful, Evelyn replied, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. We have so many ideas to reach more people, especially in rural areas where resources are scarce, and support networks are often limited. We could create materials in different languages, develop an app for secure financial tracking, maybe even open a small dedicated office. They exchanged cards, agreeing to a meeting for the following week. As we walked toward the parking lot, Evelyn seemed to be floating with excitement. Can you believe it? He exclaimed. Real funding to expand the project. This could make a huge difference. You deserve it, Evelyn, I replied. You worked hard, and you're making a difference in the lives of so many people. He stopped suddenly in the middle of the parking lot and hugged me. A strong hug, full of gratitude. None of this would have been possible without you, Mom. Without your strength that night, without your persistence afterward, without your support throughout this entire process. I returned the hug, feeling the peculiar sensation that only mothers know, pride and nostalgia simultaneously, seeing your child grow beyond what you could ever have imagined. You always had that strength inside you, Evelyn. You just needed to rediscover it. That night, as I drove back home alone, Evelyn had gone straight to his new apartment, a place of his own, a symbol of his reclaimed independence. I reflected on the events of the last year. The assault with the glass, the police report, the discovery of the financial crimes, Serena's arrest, Evelyn's gradual recovery, and now this promising new chapter. It was impossible not to think about how a moment of violence, terrible as it was, had triggered a series of events that brought not only justice, but also healing and purpose. The broken glass had shattered more than crystal that night. It had broken the power Serena had over Evelyn, the lies that had built their relationship, and the illusion that abuse only happens to other people. In its place, we had built something new and stronger, a renewed bond between mother and son, a shared purpose, a shared mission of transforming our own traumatic experience into hope for others. I parked in the garage, entered the house, and turned on the lights. The silence greeted me, no longer an oppressive silence of loneliness or the tense silence that preceded the assault that night, but a peaceful silence of a life that had weathered the storm and found serenity on the other side. I made a cup of tea and sat on the deck, watching the starry sky. I remembered the words of Ethan's therapist during one of the joint sessions we had. Sometimes we need to break completely to rebuild ourselves stronger. Like that crystal glass, our family had shattered momentarily. But what we built from the fragments was more resilient, more authentic, and infinitely more precious than what we had before. True strength lies not in power, but in clarity, the courage to say enough when boundaries are crossed. Judge Evelyn Hayes' story reminds us that justice often begins at home, where silence must give way to truth. If you ever face manipulation, financial control, or emotional abuse, remember, protection is not revenge, it's self-respect. Healing starts the moment you choose yourself. Thank you for listening to the full story on USLA 1 Stories. Please support our channel by subscribing, sharing with your friends and family, and leaving your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring more powerful, life-changing stories to light. See you in the next videos.